Hello and welcome to another episode of Disaster Empire Quick Views. I'm Ashley Guzman, and this is the podcast where we talk to innovators and thought leaders in resilience. And I am thrilled to have Kim Barbaria here with us today because it's, as we were talking about right before we jumped on, 2 summers in the making of having Kim on as a guest. So thank you, Kim, so much for being here. And we're going to talk to Kim about operational resilience and her program in National Indemnity. So Kim, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Excellent. So it's really great to talk to someone who's been working in a program that's embraced resilience. And so to start off, can you share some of your own experience at National Indemnity and how you feel your underwriting foundation helped inform your approach moving into business continuity and now resilience?
Yeah, I think I was really lucky in kind of the progression of how I ended up where I am today. So as you mentioned, I did start off as a commercial underwriter when I came into the company, and I had an even larger background in insurance prior to that. So I had many years of working at both the level dealing directly with insureds and then coming in and looking at the whole corporation and how we're trying to do business as a company and what defines success for the company. And so that actually gave me a little bit different insight. And as I moved through a couple of different roles, I found myself working with people across the entire enterprise and getting to know a lot of different departments and how those departments functioned in order for me to do my job successfully. And so that put me in a unique position when it came time for the company to actually really start working on business continuity and disaster recovery, that I knew the people and I knew a lot of the jobs that were being done and what was important.
And that's a great foundation. And I think one of the things that is unique about the insurance industry is that understanding of risk. And we'll get into that a little bit more, really embracing business continuity and DR in that way, because we want to limit exposure definitely in the industry. So here's a question, though, that I ask all of my guests. How do you define resilience?
You know, I think that it's all about how we can respond and how we can be strong and just adapt to whatever the situation is. I didn't have a really good definition for it, and I have a coworker within our resilience team who is a former Marine, and we jokingly say "Semper Gumby." So we want we want to be flexible, and that's a big part of resilience for us.
Okay. Hey, and as I mentioned, your program at National Indemnity has embraced operational resilience and championed that. So what does it really mean from a program perspective? How is it different from traditional DR or business continuity management?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I feel like we have stumbled into so many things that we have found success in here. And maybe unintentionally at first, that we then put a lot of intention and purpose around as it continued to evolve. So when I started, I was voluntold to help the company with our with our business continuity planning, and we actually had a third-party vendor that we were working with as we were defining all of our plans. And I fell in love with the concept of resilience and with helping other people. I think it fits really well in with my Myers-Briggs personality. When I look at who I am, I fit into that INFJ, if you guys have all done Myers-Briggs, which says that it's all about helping people. And I think that played a big part into where I wanted to go with this program, and where the people that I have surrounded myself with, the other team members here, where we all feel the process should evolve. And so we moved more from just strictly being, the business component and the DR part of making sure that we're operationally sound, into personal resilience and safety, and the fact that we pushed a lot early on. Pre-pandemic, there was a very different view of BCDR, I think, even at our company and a lot of companies. But we had emphasized from the get-go that, people come first. It's about the safety of our people, and then we worry about our operations. Our very first tabletop with our crisis action team, we did a active shooter scenario, and we didn't have a very well defined team yet. I mean, we had the right people in the room, but we hadn't really defined all of their roles, and that brought safety of people into focus really quick. But one of the things that we decided to do was point out that, we shouldn't be limited to the scope that it can be defined within BC and DR. We need to look at how we tie in with other areas of the company. How do we partner with wellness when they're doing health fairs, and make sure that we're actually talking about how being resilient is part of having that healthy lifestyle? How do we partner with safety, which we actually brought safety underneath the umbrella of resilience in our company. So we have 4 tiers, and I'm kind of trying to add a 5th one, being more of a vendor management perspective as well, because I see that falls under my purview just in general at the company. And so I'm working on kind of showing how that is part of resilience. And that's the big thing. I think that our company has embraced the fact that in order for us as a company and an organization to be holistically resilient, we need to look at all of the different ways that can happen. And that means that our team, who's constantly looking at different threats, risks, that we can play a role in that. Now, I will say the other area that we are working on partnering that is really helpful is with our enterprise risk management team and internal audit. We're trying to align ourselves better with what their objectives are, because they're strictly looking from an enterprise level, from that operational side, what we need to do for kind of that resilience and how we manage our risk. And so now we will talk to the leadership side of that group to say, what can we do to make sure that we're not only covering what we want to from the personnel side and from, the holistic view of our personal resilience and our employee resilience, but what can we do to partner with you to make sure that we're successful on the enterprise side of the house?
So that makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like your program is really embracing an organizational resilience mindset, not just thinking about the operational, but really, as you said, looking at the well-being of employees, safety, aligning and understanding risk for the organization overall. And that makes a lot of sense. Can you talk about how your program came to be as it is today, how it evolved?
I mentioned that we started off just doing a couple of plans from check the box for regulatory compliance perspective. And I think it was a matter of having the right people involved, because I don't think that any program is going to be successful if you're starting off from that perspective. A company might be happy with that because that's what they set out to do, is to make sure that from a regulatory perspective, you're okay. But our team members, I mentioned my personality type and why this was important to me, but then my coworker Mick comes from the background in the military and 20 years in JAG. And so he's looking at this from a very structured military perspective. And then I've got Allie, who graduated from college with a degree in emergency management. And so we're coming at this from 3 different angles. And I think that is what has allowed our program to evolve the way that it has, to look at things more holistically, because we're constantly challenging each other to make sure that we're bettering our program.
Kim, I love how you're bringing in that perspective of your team and how all of you bring in your strengths and your different viewpoints. I think that's so important as we're building resilience programs, is to also have that strong team component. And I love the idea that you've purposefully thought of who on your team and what they bring to the table and how that can better inform the program overall. So you've really talked about approach, but can you share a little bit about how you're managing the program today and any keys for success that you could share with the audience?
Yeah. So right now we're actually, we got a little behind I'm going to say behind, that's the right word, in the pandemic, where we weren't really, we were constantly running up against all of the issues that everyone was facing as a part of the pandemic. And we took on some things from being ambitious and the personal resilience side, such as contact tracing. But by doing things like that, we found from our small team's perspective that we were just overwhelmed with work between managing that part of our resilience program, and that we were still doing up until late last year, we were still doing regular meetings with our crisis action team. And so we were having to constantly have that feed of information to be able to push out to everyone. And so that was consuming all of our time. And so we found ourselves like really needing to update all of our plans and look at everything that happened in the pandemic and how it could get us to improve our plan. And so now from a management perspective, I would say that we've managed to update everything and get back on track and have tabletops again. And we're now trying to evolve to that next level. So we brought in a third party to actually run a tabletop exercise for our crisis action team just in August. And we're in contact with another vendor that in the space that does a really good job with running exercises, already looking forward to next year. And we're trying to lay out a more mature program view for our leadership. We're actually, I have a meeting with a governance team on Friday. And as we look forward, we're trying to talk about how we can utilize a secondary location that's going to go live next year. And we're talking about all of our budgeting and how we can tie in some additional third-party training for individuals and not just looking at how we train our, with that modified incident command, outside of how we train everyone for that, how can we bring in some additional training and partner with learning and development to actually work through the individuals and make sure that everyone has understanding. I really think that right now from running this program, it's about evolving into that next level, like a new tier, like we want to dig and pull back another layer of the onion, I guess is a good way of describing that, to get to an even deeper understanding by everyone of what truly being resilient means and how we can accomplish that and what we need across the organization in order for us to actually achieve that, and challenge people. I think you mentioned that our leadership embraces this, and I cannot say enough how important it is to have that leadership support. I'm actually working on an article, and I'm talking about what that perfect balance is to allow us to have kind of that dream team for success and how we achieve that. And I think if we didn't have leadership support, it would just be a whole different thing. And I think about going to conferences all the time. And this question always comes up when you're sitting in one of those keynote addresses, right? Like they'll ask the question about, okay, how many of you feel like you have leadership support? And maybe it's the first thing in the morning one and it's on the last day. And so you've got some people that are like, I don't really know. But, the people who are like, yeah, I've got total leadership support in this, you don't see a lot of those like hands up waving in the air. And so I really feel like if you had talked to me before the pandemic, I kind of would have been like this, because we had leadership support, don't get me wrong, but we didn't have that like unquestioning. If I come to you and say, this is our budget and this is what we really want to achieve, just rubber stamp that and go. And the best example I have of that is that we are, I just started to mention, we're actually going live with a secondary site early next year. So it's being finished right now. Now, in all fairness, this site it has three purposes, but we were the reason we started looking for the site. So it has a large resilient space that we're going to start using, and we based it off of what our building essential personal footprint is. We call those beeps affectionately. So what is our beep footprint? And then enough space for conference rooms, things like that, to have an emergency operations center. And then to have the rest of the space, we have a large conference space, and we have a big area for innovation, to have people go to another site that they can really work together away from our normal office space and work on that. And, everyone is thinking resilience in the forefront of their minds. How, if we had an incident, how can we expand that space and take over and have another couple hundred people out there? And so, yeah, just the amount of effort being poured into that from the top down And the way that our leadership is looking at this has just truly helped me to manage this and make this a huge success.
Kim, that's great to hear. And I totally agree that having that leadership buy-in is pivotal in order to make programs like this work. And it's wonderful to hear even post COVID, because definitely hearing some rumblings from different quarters that, people forget really easily. And leadership is dealing with a lot of challenging issues right now. So definitely not surprising. But it's great to hear that you've been able to really hold on to that, build on that leadership support, and feel even stronger coming out of the pandemic than pre. So thank you for sharing that success story. What else are some of the biggest lessons learned since the pandemic for your group?
I think our CEO said it best when we were doing not our tabletop just recently, but the one at the end of last year. We challenged them with a state actor hacking of the power grid. Something that could realistically happen, right? And something we're trying to look at those scary things that are realistic. And he after that, he was kind of giving his 2 cents on how everything went with that exercise as we were debriefing. And he said, we just have to keep working at this because we don't know what the next thing is going to be. It's not going to be what we expect, you guys. So stay on your toes and just keep working at it. And I think that was a big lesson learned from the pandemic, because if you remember going into it, so a couple of months before things really broke down here, so I would say in January, we had started meeting with our pandemic response team to kind of look at our pandemic plan, to talk through some things. And by the mid-February, we had escalated that to additional people, including our CEO. And then we brought together our crisis action team. We didn't send people home until the back half of March, but when we were just meeting with our pandemic response team, we had suggested things like, hey, maybe we should run a scenario here with like operations about what we may have to do. No, this is not going to escalate to that level. We're fine. I remember the head of underwriting coming back and being like, okay, yeah, so maybe it was maybe it was worse than we thought it was going to be. Not all joking aside, like obviously extremely serious, but just this humble reaction of, okay, yeah, underestimated what was really going to happen here. And I think that that was a huge lesson learned. Like, we tend to underestimate what's going on and what may happen, and we have to make sure that we stay on our toes. We realized we didn't need as big of a footprint remotely, and our employees are extremely successful at working remotely, working from home. But that brought in a whole new layer of resilience, which is another lesson learned, and something that we had to really talk about with ERM, because from an enterprise risk management perspective, they're thinking about the buildings, and we were looking at different in our matrix for risk, and we look at what the counties and the cities say are low, medium, high, for instance, and you look at fire, and it's a higher risk at the county level versus our downtown building here in Omaha, where in these larger buildings, the risk of fire is relatively low. And so he had it listed as low, and I said, we can't list it as low because it's not just about the building. It's about the risk to our people who are now scattered across the metro area. We have to think about, if there is a blackout, it's not about whether that blackout impacts us downtown. It's about how many of our people are impacted by that blackout and what can we do to help them, so that, is it telling them they should stay where they are and don't, worry about work right now? Is like, how are we as a company, how are we responding to that? And what is the blurred line? It's a blurred line. It's very gray, like insurance can be. So what is that line between where we're responsible and where personal responsibility comes into play.
Right.
So we're finding a lot of lessons around that have come from, because that was a lesson out of the pandemic as well. We still provide COVID tests to our employees, and we will continue to do so actually through the rest of this year. Then we're finally going to call it quits unless there's a change that would precipitate us actually going back to that. But these are all things that we had just found we really need to keep our eyes open and look to the future and look at what else is going to come our way, and think about what might have seemed unreasonable previously,
Yeah.
that may be reasonable now.
Absolutely. And I think you're bringing up what the majority of us out there have had to shift to think about. And as we're talking about risk forecasting and collaborating with ERM, love all those points. Yeah, definitely the reliance on location and planning for loss of location really came out of 9/11 and that experience. Well, now our pandemic experience is our work, right? For many of us, the way that people work has shifted, and we have that hybrid or remote work, combination. And so now the big risks are, what if you don't have power at home and your people can't work? Or what if they lose access to their applications? Or what if we have an event like they had in Canada last year with Rogers, with our
Yeah.
third or fourth party provider, largest one in a country, going down? What do we do? Or even a secondary provider is going to take out a lot of our employees. So I love that forward thinking. So kudos to all of you for being on top of that and really trying to be innovative and moving the program forward. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about what are the biggest lessons learned that you've seen or changes in your program since you have embraced that resilience mindset. How has it helped you as you've evolved the program through these major calamities and as you're thinking of other things that could happen in the future?
Yep, I think things for us have been from a shift are, one, looking at things from a bigger lens, broadening out what our scope is. Two, remembering that we do not operate in a bubble. We have to collaborate with as many groups across the organization as we can. It not only helps us as far as how successful we are and who we have involved in response, but it also makes sure that everyone in the company is aware of what we're doing, what we're about, and how we can partner with them, even individually, to make things more successful for them. And three, it actually has started to trigger other parts of the company to come to us and ask for our input. And that, I think, was one of those pivotal moments. It was actually, I half jokingly told my boss, I'm a huge, huge musical fan. And at the time, Hamilton was really big. And he asked me what was one of the things that I wanted to get at. It was when I was shifting. I was already doing BCDR in my prior role, but when I was shifting over to work for my current manager, he asked what I wanted to get at this, and I said, "Well, I want to be in the room where it happens, man." Like I feel very strongly about this. I feel that right, disaster reactionary. And where I want to go, and the biggest thing in my mind from shifting to resilience is that we're no longer reactionary. We are forward focused, and that should be considered. When we're thinking about a major software acquisition, let's talk to a resilience professional about some of the impacts of this. If we're looking at changing how the operation behaves in a certain way, totally beneficial to have someone from resilience in the room, because there aren't many people in the company that know more across the board. They're know specifics, right? That's not every specific detail, but broadly, we can speak to a lot of that at a high level and actually respond. Well, what are the consequences if we do this? Let me tell you what some of the consequences could be. I mean, that should be our job as resilience professionals. And I think that we sell ourselves short if we don't aim for something like that. And I think the company leadership across the company, it still hasn't gotten to the point at all enterprises, I don't think, where resilience kind of has that seat at the table, like an equal C-suite seat at the table. But I think that we should get there. And I think that should be kind of a driving direction for us from an operational or organizational resilience, whichever way you want to look at that. We should be thinking of our.
Absolutely. And you are speaking my tune in my language, because I'm just writing an article on why I think there should be a chief resilience officer in organizations now, aligned with risk, right? But we really need someone to lead resilience in the C-suite. So definitely right on board with that thinking. Hey, thank you for all of those points. And I think you remind us that that is our superpower in resilience, is that we do have that understanding of the organization as a whole, and that ability to ask those informative and probing questions to really help build that resilience. And sometimes I think we need the reminder that we have access to that information and that value that we can provide. Hey, what are the biggest challenges that you see to resilience in the near term? And you've, had this program in place for a few years now, definitely experiencing some challenging events. So what are you thinking about in going forward right now?
What keeps me up still at night is definitely I feel like no matter what we do, and all the things that we put in place, all of the professionals that know a lot about cyber, because we have some good ones here, I know. And so that, for me, that's a big one. And I'm not even working alongside our team of cyber folks from an InfoSec perspective, but that's a big one. And what our role should be is, as it relates to planning with our information security teams, we should be knowledgeable. And along those same lines, from a technology perspective, we're investing a lot in cloud. And, I know so much about our current data centers and how DR works, how it fail over, what processes we use, how that works. I have learned a nerdy amount of knowledge about it, and I just love it. And now, talking about cloud and the various cloud providers and what their options are and how those things work. I'm not going to say it's a whole new language. It almost feels like a whole new language. And an amount of resource at your disposal, and how much control do you or don't you have? How it depends on how you set it up. I feel fortunate that we're having a lot of discussion around the resilience component of that, and my opinion is being asked. Like, yay! That is a win. Definitely, I feel like along with that I mentioned previously, that personal level. Those are the things I think that we really need to work on from a resilience here. I think everyone has their own things that they are going to find. Like it's going to be a little different from organization to organization, depending on how mature the program is. But those are some big ones. From a risk type perspective, keeping a close eye on some of the climate change and how do we align with like our green team better, and what kinds of things should we be worried about? Previously we've talked in our small group from a resilience perspective, we've been talking about drought and what a high risk drought is, and now we're finally seeing some of those impacts of drought and how that plays into other risk. And so we can better define why drought is a high risk for us. It's a secondary impact almost. So like it's one level removed, but it's those secondary impacts of drought that are causing high risk for us. So we're looking at that and what other things are going to come from climate change. So those are the big ones.
And all of the data is saying those natural disaster, natural hazards, severe events are not going away. And in fact, they are accelerating in terms of their overall impacts, cost and to the community, to our environment. So love that you're taking that forward approach in that way. And definitely those points in terms of cyber risk and that being, as we've known, an increasing trend. And then how do we in the resilience space really support an organization through the operational challenges of when you have a cyber attack and what can realistically be done, and how do we prepare the organization to really pivot. And I think that's where the business continuity aspects can really come in and help all that good foundational work, and then taking it and looking at it with a slightly different lens. So thank you for all of those great reminders of areas that we need to dive into and have continued value. Hey, as we wrap up today, is there anything else that you wanted to share with this audience that you didn't get a chance to yet? I wanted to thank you for all of the insights so far.
I think the biggest thing I would say is just stick at it with leadership, and what your value proposal is. If you don't have a governance board, get a governance board, and make sure that it's a board that champions your work, because that makes a difference.
I completely agree with that. And actually is something I see as a miss that amazingly some organizations still have not put in true, group of C-suite level champions for the work. So thank you for that as well. Hey, is there a fun fact that you might want to share with the audience? It's just a way to people to get to know you a little bit better. It's either a hobby or something fun that you'd like to do in your spare time, which I know we all have so much of, right?
I joke about this sometimes. Does cruising count as a hobby? I just got back about a month ago. My husband and I took my parents on a cruise down to the Eastern Caribbean, had a great time. But I'm already looking forward to next summer. My nephew's graduating from high school, and my sister-in-law and I are taking him. I told him we would go anywhere, whatever he wanted to do, that's what we would do for his graduation. And we're going to Europe. Nice. And we're cruising. So we're going to Oslo, and so we can see the fjords. And then we're going to come down, and we're hitting like 8 countries, I think, in this trip. But I love travel so much, and seeing the differences around the world. And so I'm so excited. It's his first time, getting on an airplane, but definitely, felt like you should go to Europe. Like while when I'm offering to go anywhere in the world, we should definitely do this and go to Europe. So excited to take him to see a lot of new things. And I would say travel, it's definitely a passion. So
that sounds fabulous. And I think I haven't been on a cruise, but one of the great things that I hear is that there is a lack of self-service. So it's great to have that digital break, right, that many of us don't get in our profession. So thank you. And that's so great that you're taking him to do that. What a
so
treat.
Excited.
It'll be an adventure of a lifetime for him as he transitions to his next phase of life. So hey, thank you so much for spending time with us. And I want to thank the audience as well for, again, spending your time. Can really appreciate your insights. You touched on so many aspects that I think are so important for us running these resilience programs to think about. Great to hear the journey of your program over the last few years, and then where you're looking to take the program in the future. So I wanted to thank you so much for being with us here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Ashley.
Absolutely. Love to have you back sometime.
Thanks.